A millionaire storms out of a café, only to find two little girls wearing his red scarf. He opens his mouth to yell, but the older one looks up and whispers, "I thought it was nobody's. My sister was cold." The wind that evening was sharp, the kind that bit through coats and stung exposed skin even if one tried to pretend it didn't. Owen Hayes stepped out of the warm glow of the café and onto the stone steps, absently adjusting the dark blue coat on his shoulders. He had just finished a business meeting that left him irritated and exhausted, though he would never admit exhaustion to anyone, least of all himself. The world expected him to be composed, decisive, unshakable, and he obeyed that expectation so well that most forgot he was human at all. The door closed behind him with a soft chime, and the noise of the city felt muted under the cold air. It was then that he noticed a shape near the bottom of the steps. No, two shapes. They sat pressed close together on the ground against the brick wall of the building. At first he thought they were simply children waiting for their parents, but something about the stillness in the way they sat, the way their shoulders curled inwards, made him pause. The younger one could not have been more than 4, small, delicate, with light blonde curls that framed her face. Her skin was pale, almost translucent from the cold, and her blue eyes were lowered as she hugged her knees. Around her neck was wrapped a thick red scarf. His scarf. The one he had draped on the chair inside earlier when the cafe heater made the room too warm. He recognized it instantly. The bright color was impossible to mistake. The older girl sat beside her, slightly taller, perhaps 6 years old. Her hair was also blonde, but straighter, tied back in a loose ribbon that was fraying at the ends. She wore an orange dress that was entirely wrong for the temperature, the fabric thin and weathered as though it had been washed too many times. She wasn't crying, though her eyes were rimmed with fatigue and worry far too old for her small face. She held the younger girl with one arm, trying to shield her from wind that did not care. They looked like they had been outside for hours. Owen's first instinct was irritation, familiar and automatic, the instinct of someone who has spent too long living in a world where everything could be controlled, arranged, owned. He took a step forward, his voice firm, sharp with habit. "That belongs to me," he said, nodding toward the scarf. "Where did you get it?" The older girl looked up at him. Her blue eyes were startlingly clear, startlingly direct. She did not flinch. She did not try to run. She simply held his gaze, and there was something in her expression, something raw, a kind of tired bravery that no 6-year-old child should have needed. The younger girl clung tighter to the scarf, as though it were the only barrier between her and the freezing world around her. There were 1,000 things Owen expected to hear. An excuse. A lie. Silence. Tears. But none of those came. "I'm sorry," the older girl said softly. Her voice was steady, but small. "I thought it didn't belong to anyone. My sister was cold." Owen stood very still. The wind moved around him, but he barely felt it. The irritation that had risen so quickly dissipated just as quickly, leaving something heavier behind. He looked closer now, really looked. Their shoes were worn, the soles thinning. Their fingertips were red from cold. Their bodies were too thin, the kind of thinness that didn't come from skipping one meal but many. And in the older girl's eyes was the unmistakable knowledge of what it meant to have no place to go. For a moment, the city noises faded. His mind flickered with memories he had spent years burying, a small hand holding his, laughter in the back seat of a car, a voice calling him daddy. Then a hospital waiting room. A doctor's lowered eyes. A silence that hollowed out everything inside him. He blinked, forcing the images away. Not now. Not here. The younger girl whimpered softly, shifting closer into her sister's side. The red scarf slipped slightly from her shoulder, and the older girl carefully adjusted it again, her hands gentle, practiced. Owen realized then that she had done this 1,000 times already, protecting someone smaller than herself, with absolutely nothing to protect her in return. He exhaled, the breath visible in the cold air. His voice, when it came, was quieter. "What are your names?" The older girl hesitated, as if unsure whether answering was safe. Then she said, "I'm Emma. And this is Bella." Emma and Bella. The names hit him like something physical, though he didn't show it. "And where are your parents?" he asked. Emma swallowed. Her lips trembled slightly, but her voice did not break. "Mom got sick. They took her in an ambulance. I don't know where. And, we don't have a dad." Bella looked up, her blue eyes wide and confused, not understanding the conversation but understanding the fear. Owen felt something slowly crack inside him, something he had reinforced for years, something he believed would never break again. He looked down at them, two small girls sitting on cold stone, in the night, wrapped in something they didn't mean to take, simply because they had no other warmth. And in that moment, he knew he would not be walking away. For a moment, no one moved. The three of them remained there on the cold stone steps, the wind curling around them like something alive. Emma's arm tightened protectively around Bella, and Bella's small fingers curled in the fabric of the scarf as if letting go of it meant losing the last piece of safety she had. Owen stood above them, feeling the weight of a decision forming even before he fully understood it. He wasn't used to hesitation. In business, hesitation cost millions; in his past, hesitation had cost far more. But this was different. There was no strategy here, no calculation, no negotiation. Only two small girls, freezing, hungry, and alone. He crouched slowly, lowering himself to their level. The wind tugged at his coat as if trying to pull him back. "How long have you been out here?" he asked, though he suspected the answer would hurt. Emma hesitated again, as if balancing truth against the fear of being taken away. "Since yesterday," she said. "We tried to stay in a hallway of an apartment building, but someone yelled at us to leave. We walked a lot. Bella got tired." She looked down at her sister with a guilt no child should ever feel. "She doesn't understand everything. I have to. I have to think for both of us." Bella shifted slightly, pressing her cheek into Emma's shoulder, her small face flushed from cold and fatigue. Owen wondered how many times Emma had said those words, to herself, to strangers, to anyone who would listen. He wondered how many nights she had stayed awake, keeping watch over Bella to make sure nothing happened to her. The responsibility she carried clung to her like a second skin. It reminded him of himself in a way he didn't want to admit. He stood and extended his hand. "Come inside. Both of you. You need warmth. Food. Rest." Emma looked at the hand as though it were something dangerous, something sharp. Trust was not something she could afford to give easily. The world had taught her that. Her eyes searched his face, studying him, testing him. Owen held himself still, letting her see the truth, or at least the absence of threat. He didn't soften his expression. He didn't force a smile. He simply waited. Finally, Emma nodded. She stood slowly, helping Bella to her feet. Bella wobbled, her legs stiff from the cold, and Owen instinctively reached out to steady her. She flinched at first, but then allowed it, too tired to resist. Emma guided her inside the café, and Owen followed them, holding the door as warmth washed over them like a tide. The café staff looked up, startled. Two small children in thin dresses did not belong in a place full of polished cups and quiet conversations. But Owen was known there, his presence alone commanded silence. He led them to a booth in the corner, away from the draft of the door, and spoke to the barista in a low voice. "Warm soup. Bread. Something sweet for Bella. Cocoa, 2 cups. Extra whipped cream." The staff seemed to understand without questions. Emma sat stiffly on the booth seat, as if ready to run at any moment. Bella curled beside her, now half asleep again, lulled by the heat and the promise of safety that she didn't yet know how to trust. When the cocoa arrived, Bella reached for it with a small, trembling hand. Emma guided it carefully to her lips, steadying the cup so it didn't spill. Owen watched the way her hands moved, gentle, practiced, careful in a way that had nothing to do with childhood and everything to do with survival. "You've been taking care of her alone," he said quietly. Emma nodded. "I have to." Her voice was steady again, but softer this time. The kind of softness that came from exhaustion, not comfort. "She gets scared. And she's small. I'm bigger, so I have to help her. I promised Mom I would." She swallowed, her throat working hard. "I promised." Her words struck something deep in Owen. The promise of a child. A vow given without understanding how heavy it would become. He knew that weight. He had once made promises, too. Promises he failed to keep. The soup arrived next, steam curling gently from the bowl. Emma watched Bella eat first, only taking a spoonful herself after Bella had finished half. That small gesture undid him more than anything else. It was instinctual, unquestioned, absolute. Sacrifice. He cleared his throat. "Do you know the hospital your mother was taken to?" Emma shook her head. There were lights and noise and so many people. I only remember her hand letting go of mine." Her voice cracked on the last word, and she quickly looked down, blinking hard. Owen felt something inside him shift, not dramatically, not loudly, but like ice beginning to break after years of winter. He had built walls so thick around himself he'd nearly forgotten there were doors anywhere. But here, now, a door began to open on its own. When the girls had finished eating, Bella lay curled up against Emma's side, already drifting into sleep. Her breathing was slow and even for the first time in days. Emma stayed awake, though her eyelids were heavy, watching everything around her, still protecting Bella even in safety. Owen leaned forward slightly, his voice quiet but steady. "You will not be spending another night outside. Not while I am here." Emma looked at him again, and this time there was no calculation, no testing, no wall. Only a fragile, unbelievable hope. "Why?" she whispered. He didn't have the words yet. He didn't know how to explain loss, regret, and the way two small girls sitting in the cold could wake memories he had buried so deeply he thought they were gone. He didn't know how to say that he recognized something in Emma that reminded him of a promise he once failed to keep. So he simply said, "Because you shouldn't have had to ask for help alone." Emma's chin trembled. Her shoulders sagged with the weight of finally, briefly, not being responsible for everything. And for the first time that night, she let herself rest. Owen drove them through the quiet evening streets, the city lights blinking like tired stars in the fogged windows. The heater in the car hummed, blowing warm air that wrapped around the two girls in the back seat. Bella slept almost immediately, her cheek pressed to Emma's shoulder, small fingers still clutching a fold of the red scarf as though afraid that if she loosened her grip, warmth itself might disappear. Emma stayed awake, though her eyes kept drifting shut, her head tilting forward before she forced it upright again. She watched the world outside the window with a kind of wary disbelief, as if she were afraid that any moment this brief safety would dissolve like breath on glass. Owen kept glancing at them through the rearview mirror. His hands rested on the steering wheel, but his mind was somewhere else entirely. He remembered driving like this once, many years ago, with the sound of laughter from a child's seat in the back. He remembered glancing in the mirror then too, just to watch her smile. He remembered thinking there would always be time to take the scenic route, to slow down and enjoy life. Then he remembered how quickly that illusion had shattered. The memory pressed behind his ribs like something sharp, but he didn't turn away from it this time. Instead, he let the ache stay. Emma's voice came quietly from the back seat. "Where are we going?" "To my home," Owen answered, his voice even. She hesitated. "For tonight?" He didn't lie. "For as long as you need to be somewhere safe." Emma didn't respond for a long moment, but he saw her shoulders lower, just slightly, as if a tension she had been holding for days loosened a fraction. Outside, the snow began to fall again, soft flakes drifting lazily, catching the glow of the street lamps. The storm had calmed, but the cold still felt absolute. The city seemed too big for two girls so small, and too empty for a man who had spent years surrounded by noise and never once felt less alone because of it. When they arrived, the house stood silent under the snowfall. A large stone building with tall windows and elegant lines, beautiful, but still and quiet, as though waiting for something. Owen turned off the engine, and the sudden stillness seemed to echo. He opened the back door first, careful not to let the cold rush in too quickly. Bella remained asleep, her breathing soft and steady. Emma gently shook her awake, whispering her name with tenderness that made Owen's chest tighten again. Inside, the house was warm, light pooling softly across polished wood floors and cream-colored walls. It was a home designed for comfort, but for years it had felt like a museum, preserved, untouched, frozen. The girls stepped in slowly, almost silently, as if afraid of being told to leave. Emma's fingers brushed lightly over the edge of a table, and Owen realized she was checking whether it was real, whether touching it was allowed. "You can sit," he said quietly. "You're not guests. You're safe here." Emma nodded, but did not sit until Bella was settled first. Bella curled into the deep cushions of a large armchair, her eyelids heavy and fluttering, too tired to take in anything more than warmth. Emma stood beside the chair, still upright, still watchful, her hands gently stroking Bella's hair. Owen left them just long enough to bring blankets from a hallway closet, soft and thick and warm. When he returned, Emma accepted one and tucked it around her sister with careful, practiced movements. Only when Bella was fully cocooned did she wrap a second blanket around herself. Even then, she left her hands outside the blanket so she could keep holding on to Bella. After a long silence, Owen knelt beside them, not too close, but close enough that Emma would know he wasn't leaving. "Emma," he began, quietly, because he understood loudness would break something fragile, "what you've been doing, taking care of Bella on your own, that's something no child should ever have to do. But you did. And you did it well." Emma looked at him, startled, as if no one had ever spoken those words to her. Her face crumpled, not into tears, but into something softer, more breakable. "If I don't take care of her," she whispered, "no one will." He shook his head gently. "You don't have to do that alone anymore." She blinked, and he could see she both wanted to believe him and was too afraid to. Belief was dangerous when the world had already proven itself cruel. He stood and turned toward the kitchen. "I'll make tea. And something warm to eat. You both need rest." As he walked away, Emma finally allowed herself to sit. Bella shifted and leaned into her, and Emma's eyes fluttered closed, not in trust, not yet, but in exhaustion beyond resisting safety when it was offered. Owen entered the kitchen, turned on the stove, and stood there for a long moment with his hands braced against the counter. The quiet house felt different now, like the first breath after years of holding one's lungs still. He could hear the soft sound of Bella's breathing, the quieter sound of Emma's, and the faint ticking of the antique clock in the hallway. It occurred to him, suddenly and overwhelming, that these sounds were not just filling the silence. They were beginning to replace it. The next morning came quietly, without alarm or urgency, only the pale winter light slipping through the tall windows and the faint sound of a heating system working against the cold. Owen woke early out of habit, the kind of waking where the body rises before the mind catches up. For a few disoriented seconds, he forgot the previous night, forgot the cafe steps and the red scarf and two small figures in the snow. Then he heard movement downstairs, light, careful movement, and everything returned in an instant. He dressed without thinking too much, pulling on a crisp shirt and sweater, though his hands moved slower than usual, as if his mind was somewhere ahead of him. He found Emma awake in the living room, sitting in the same chair where she had fallen asleep, though now she was upright, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders like a small shield. Bella was still curled against her side, her breathing deep and even. The storm outside had passed during the night, leaving the world clean and bright, the snow glowing softly in the early light. For a moment, the room felt like a painting, still, gentle, untouched. Emma was staring at the window, but not really seeing it. Her eyes were distant, tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. When she noticed him, she sat up straighter, as if preparing for something she wasn't sure of yet. She didn't speak, and he didn't rush to fill the silence. Instead, he moved toward the kitchen, motioning for her to follow if she wished. She hesitated before standing carefully so as not to wake Bella. She tucked the blanket around her sister and then followed him, her bare feet silent against the floor. In the kitchen, the light was warmer. Owen began making breakfast: eggs, toast, oatmeal, fresh fruit. Not because he thought they needed something elaborate, but because doing something tangible steadied him. Emma watched him, still tense, her hands gripping the edge of the counter as if ready to run if he made a sudden move. He noticed, and he moved slowly, not forcing conversation, just letting the room breathe. Finally, she spoke in a low voice. "Are you going to call someone?" Her fingers tightened on the counter, her shoulders rising defensively. She didn't need to clarify who she meant. Social workers. Authorities. The people who decide, with forms and signatures, where a child should live. Owen paused, spoon in hand, then set it down. He turned to her fully. "I called the hospitals last night," he said. "I wanted to know where your mother is." Emma's breath caught, and he saw how this single question had been clawing inside her all night. "She's at St. Anne's Medical Center. She's alive. In treatment. Stable for now." Emma's hands loosened, just barely. She blinked hard, but no tears fell. Crying was probably something she had trained herself not to do. It made your vision blurry, made your breathing uneven, made your guard drop. She simply nodded. "Thank you." He didn't say "you're welcome." It didn't feel like something to be thanked for. Emma exhaled slowly, then asked the question she had been avoiding. "So, what happens now?" Owen leaned against the counter across from her, keeping a respectful distance. "Now we make sure you and Bella are safe, warm, fed. And that your mother gets the care she needs." He paused. "No one is taking either of you anywhere today. Or tomorrow. Or any day without us knowing exactly what will happen." She stared at him for a long time, searching again, measuring the sincerity of every word. Emma didn't trust adults because she had no reason to. Yet she listened. Bella woke then, crying softly from the other room, small and frightened by the unfamiliar surroundings. Emma rushed to her instantly, but Bella didn't cling to only her this time. When Bella looked up and saw Owen in the doorway, her crying didn't grow louder. She simply looked at him, uncertain, tired, trying to understand if he was someone she should fear or someone she could allow into her tiny world. Owen knelt beside her, not too close. "Good morning," he said softly. "There's breakfast if you'd like." Bella blinked at him through her tears. Then, slowly, she nodded. They ate together at the long dining table, though the table felt too large for 3 people. Bella sat between them, eating slowly but eagerly. Emma ate more this time, no longer waiting for Bella to finish first. Owen didn't speak much during the meal. He allowed the quiet to feel comfortable rather than heavy. After breakfast, Bella wandered toward the living room, drawn to the bookshelf filled with picture books and photo albums that had not been touched in years. She reached for a book about animals and curled up on the rug, still small under the enormous sunlight filling the room. Emma stood beside the table, her fingers gently brushing the edge of her mug. "You don't even know us," she said quietly. "Why are you helping?" Her voice wasn't suspicious or accusatory. It was simply honest. Owen looked at her, and the answer that formed was not one he had planned or rehearsed. "Because someone once helped me," he said. "And I didn't understand it then either." Emma took that in slowly. She didn't ask for more. She simply nodded. For the first time since he met her, her shoulders lowered, not much, just enough to show she no longer felt she had to stand between him and Bella like a shield. The house was no longer silent. It was beginning to breathe again. The following Saturday, Owen drove Emma and Bella to the hospital. The morning air was crisp and sharp, the sky washed in pale winter blue, the world quiet in that way it tends to be when something important is about to happen. Bella sat in the back seat with her stuffed rabbit, silent but not sad, just unsure. Emma sat beside her, hands clasped tightly around each other, ringing, then loosening, then ringing again. She hadn't said much since they left the house. Owen didn't push. He knew there were no words that could make this easier. The hospital was large, white, clean in a way that felt a little too bright. Owen walked ahead to handle the paperwork, speaking with the receptionist, confirming room numbers, making sure that when Emma walked in, there would be no confusion, no strangers asking questions they weren't ready to answer. He did it quietly, smoothly, with the same precision he used to run boardrooms, except now there was something softer in the care he took. Bella held his free hand, trusting him now without needing to think about it. Emma followed close behind, though she pretended she didn't need to. They took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled faintly of antiseptic and something sweet, like lavender soap. Nurses wheeled equipment carts past them. A doctor laughed with a patient down the hall. The world kept moving, but Emma moved slower and slower, as if every step cost something. Owen walked beside her now, not leading, not pushing, simply staying close. When they reached room 418, Emma stopped. Her breath caught. Bella looked up at her, confused, and tugged lightly at her sleeve. Emma knelt, placing her hands gently on Bella's shoulders. "We're going to see Mama," she whispered. And though her voice was steady, her hands trembled. Inside the room, their mother lay in a narrow bed, pale but breathing. Monitors beeped steadily beside her, soft rhythmic reminders that life continued. Her face looked different than the last time Emma had seen her, less tense, less exhausted, as if sleep had finally found her after years of fighting it. Her arms were covered with medical tape and 4 lines, but her expression was soft, peaceful even. Bella ran to the bedside immediately, climbing up onto the chair. She touched her mother's hand with both of hers, small fingers enveloping a larger, weakened one. "Mama," she whispered with the kind of gentleness only children seem to master. Their mother's eyelids fluttered slowly, and then her eyes opened, focusing, recognizing. Tears filled them instantly. "Bella," she breathed. Her voice cracked, thin, fragile. "Emma." Emma didn't run in. She didn't collapse into her mother's arms. She stood still, eyes fixed on the floor, hands at her sides. She looked like she was trying to hold up an entire world with her shoulders. Her mother reached toward her with trembling fingers. "Come here, sweetheart." Emma stepped forward only when her resolve finally broke. She leaned down, and her mother pulled her into an embrace that was weak but real. Emma's face pressed into the fabric of the hospital gown, and for the first time she let herself cry, not in gasping sobs, but in quiet tears that slipped down her cheeks like something finally allowed to fall. Owen stepped back from the bed, giving them space, but not leaving the room entirely. He stood near the window, hands in the pockets of his coat, watching the snow fall softly outside. He knew this moment was not his. He was simply witness to it, something oddly sacred. For the first time in years, the house inside him felt like it was beginning to warm, brick by brick. When the reunion settled into a soft quiet, Emma's mother looked toward Owen. She recognized him, not personally, but in the way someone recognizes a person who has intervened at a moment when kindness felt impossible. Her eyes filled again, but this time not with pain. "Thank you," she whispered, barely audible. Owen shook his head gently. "You don't have to thank me." Her lips formed a faint smile. "I do." She looked back at her daughters. "They haven't had anyone. Just me. And I haven't." Her voice trembled. "I couldn't give them enough." Emma shook her head fiercely, still holding her mother's hand. "You did. You always did. You just got tired." Her mother exhaled, relieved to be forgiven for something she had never spoken aloud. A doctor entered the room, asked Emma and Bella to wait in the hallway for a moment. Owen stepped out with them, but he didn't let Emma stand alone. Bella leaned against him, sleepy again after the emotional weight of the morning. When the doctor finished speaking inside the room, Emma's mother called softly for them to return. She told them plans would need to be made. She would recover, but it would take time. She would not be able to take care of them, not yet. Maybe not fully for a while. Her voice trembled again. Before Emma could speak, Owen stepped closer, not claiming, not assuming, simply offering. "They'll stay with me," he said quietly. "As long as needed. And you'll focus on getting well." Emma looked up at him, surprised, but not shocked. Something in her expression softened, something that had been locked tight since the day they met. Her mother nodded slowly, relief flooding her face until she could no longer hold back tears. Bella climbed back into her lap, small arms wrapping around her neck. Emma rested her head against her mother's shoulder. And Owen stood beside them, steady, present, unmoving. Not replacing, but holding the space together until healing could begin. The days that followed settled into a quiet rhythm, not quite ordinary, but steady enough that the house began to feel lived in again. The girls moved through the rooms as if learning the layout of a new world, where warmth did not disappear overnight and where meals appeared without needing to be stretched carefully to last. Bella grew especially attached to the big armchair by the fireplace, curling up with her stuffed rabbit to watch the flames. Emma still watched everything more quietly, her posture always slightly protective, but something in her had begun to loosen, the tension in her shoulders not as constant, her expression not always guarded. Owen learned more about them in the kind of details that are not offered in conversations, but revealed in small habits. Emma always served Bella first and didn't start eating until Bella had taken her first bite. Bella laughed with her entire body when something genuinely delighted her, though those moments were still rare. Emma never asked for anything for herself, but she always asked for extra blankets for Bella, or which foods Bella liked, or whether Bella could sleep on the side of the bed that was closer to the wall. She had learned to be a caretaker before she had learned to be a child. Owen found himself adjusting just as quietly. He started coming home earlier. He rescheduled meetings that had once seemed untouchable. He worked from the office downstairs rather than driving into the city. He brewed tea the way Emma liked it, with honey instead of sugar, and made sure the cereal Bella preferred was always in the pantry. These were simple things, but they weren't small. One evening, snow began to fall again, heavy this time, thick flakes drifting past the windows as if the whole sky had turned to white. Owen brought firewood inside while Emma helped Bella build a small fort out of pillows and blankets in the living room. Bella insisted the fort needed a roof, so Owen found an old quilt tucked away in a linen closet and draped it across the top, creating a warm little cave illuminated by the orange glow of the fire. Bella crawled inside, giggling, the sound bright and soft. She tugged at Emma's sleeve until Emma followed her into the space. The two of them sat inside, huddled close together, whispering something Owen couldn't hear. He sat on the couch nearby, watching the fire and listening to the faint murmur of their voices. It was the kind of scene he once thought he would never experience again, not because he didn't want to, but because grief had convinced him the world no longer had a place for softness. After a while, Bella crawled out of the fort and climbed into his lap without asking. She curled there naturally, as if she had done it her whole life. He froze for just a moment, not from discomfort, but from the overwhelming unfamiliarity of the warmth that rose inside him. Bella rested her head against his chest and yawned. Emma watched from the fort entrance, her expression unreadable, not suspicious, but thoughtful. "She trusts you," Emma said quietly. Owen looked up. Emma's voice was not accusing or uncertain, it was simply stating something true. He nodded slightly. "I trust her too." Emma held his gaze for a few long seconds, studying him the way only someone who has had to evaluate adults her entire life can. Then she crawled the rest of the way out of the fort and sat beside him on the couch. She didn't lean against him, didn't reach for him, but she sat close enough that the warmth from his shoulder brushed her arm. It was not closeness exactly, but it was no longer distance. Later that night, after Bella fell asleep in her room, Emma lingered in the hallway while Owen turned off the lights. She stood near the window where the streetlight cast a soft halo of gold across her hair. She seemed like she was holding a question in her throat. "Do you have children?" she asked quietly. Owen paused. He felt the familiar ache rise, but it didn't hollow him out the way it once did. "I did," he said. His voice was steady, though it softened around the edges. "A daughter. She passed away several years ago." Emma lowered her eyes, not to avoid him, but to hold the weight of what he said. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "Thank you." For a long moment, neither said anything. It wasn't a silence of discomfort, but of understanding, two people who had lost more than the world ever considered appropriate for their ages, one too young, one grown but still grieving. Emma looked up at him again. "Does it still hurt?" He exhaled slowly. "Yes. But it hurts differently now." He searched for the right words. "Some pain stays. But it doesn't have to stay alone." Emma took that in. Slowly, she nodded. Then, very carefully, she stepped forward and rested her forehead against his arm, not a hug, not a plea, just contact. A gesture that said she was tired of holding everything by herself. He didn't move or speak. He simply stayed there with her until she was ready to step back. And in the quiet of the house, warmed by firelight and snow still falling outside, Owen realized that his home had not simply become occupied, it had begun to feel lived in again. Not by guests, but by something like a family. The call came late in the afternoon, when the sky outside had turned a muted silver and the soft warmth of the fireplace made the living room feel protected from the world. Bella was drawing by the coffee table, humming to herself, filling a page with uneven circles that she insisted were snowmen. Emma was reading near the window, curled under a blanket, her hair falling forward in soft waves. Owen was at the dining table, laptop open, reviewing documents, though his attention drifted more often to the girls than to the screen. Life had begun to move with a kind of gentle predictability. So when the phone rang, sharp against the calm, something inside Owen tightened before he even answered. It was the hospital. Emma's mother's condition had changed. Not life-threatening, the nurse clarified quickly. But serious enough that she needed a new treatment plan, one that would require time, medication, and stability. They would need to discuss long-term arrangements for the girls. Emma looked up the moment Owen returned from the hallway, her eyes fixed on his face, searching before he could even speak. He walked to her slowly, not wanting to rush toward pain. Bella continued drawing, unaware. "They want to talk about what comes next," he said gently. Emma didn't speak, didn't move. Only her hands tightened around the blanket. Owen continued, sitting beside her, lowering his voice. Your mother will recover. But it will take months. Maybe longer. She won't be able to take care of you and Bella for some time. Emma swallowed, but her expression didn't crack. She had learned to hear bad news without showing that it landed. So they'll take us away, she whispered. No, Owen's voice was firm, quiet but unshakable. No one is taking you anywhere. She looked up at him with disbelief so raw it hurt to see. But we're not family. He held her gaze. Family is not always something you're born into. Emma didn't answer. Tears didn't fall. Instead, she looked down at her hands and tried to make them stop shaking. Owen reached out and gently placed his hand over hers. Her fingers didn't pull away. They only trembled beneath his touch. The next day, they met with a social worker at the hospital. Owen dressed in a way that was not for business meetings, but for clarity and steadiness, no sharp lines meant to intimidate, no polished armor. Emma wore her orange dress, the same one from the café steps, though now it was clean and soft. Bella held Owen's hand the entire walk through the hospital halls. The social worker, Mrs. Green, was kind and observant, not hurried, not cold. She asked questions gently, about school, about routine, about what the girls needed, about whether they felt safe. Bella spoke first, her voice small but certain. Owen makes pancakes. And he reads the voices in stories funny. Emma didn't smile, but her shoulders lowered slightly. When Mrs. Green turned to her, asking what she wanted, Emma hesitated, because wanting things had always been dangerous. It meant risking loss. But she lifted her chin and spoke anyway. I want Bella to have a place where she can sleep without being scared. And I want to see my mom, when she gets better. Anne. I don't want to be separated from her. She squeezed Bella's hand. Ever. Mrs. Green nodded slowly. And Owen? How do you feel with him? Emma looked at him then, and where earlier there had been distance, now there was something steadier. Trust was too strong a word, still growing, but belief was there. Belief was enough. I feel like we're not alone, she said quietly. The decision was not made in that room, but something shifted. Something opened. Later, when they returned home, the air outside felt sharper, but not unkind. The snow was falling again, gentler this time, a whisper rather than a storm. Bella ran ahead into the living room, immediately returning to her drawings. Emma followed Owen into the kitchen. She stood there, silent, until she gathered the courage to speak. If they let us stay, even for a while, will you still want us here? Owen set down the mug he had been rinsing and turned to her fully. He didn't kneel or soften the moment into something too delicate. He spoke plainly, because she deserved certainty. Yes, he said. Not because I feel sorry for you. Not because I'm trying to replace anyone. Because you and Bella belong here. And because I want you here. Emma's breath trembled. She didn't cry. She didn't step forward. She simply nodded. But the nod was everything, permission for hope to come closer. That night, after Bella fell asleep in her small bed, Emma lingered in the doorway of her room. The house was quiet except for the hum of the heater and the soft whisper of snow outside. She didn't ask for a story. She didn't ask for reassurance. She simply said, "Good night, Owen," in a voice that carried something new, something fragile and astonishing. Warmth. He answered gently. "Good night, Emma." And the house did not feel like a place waiting for its inhabitants anymore. It felt like a home. Winter slowly faded into early spring, the snow melting into soft rivulets along the sidewalks, the air warmer but still carrying the quiet of the season that came before. Life in the house did not transform overnight, but it shifted in steady, certain ways. Bella laughed more often now, her laughter ringing down the hallway like bells. Emma began to sleep through the night without waking at every sound. Owen found himself smiling at moments he once would have overlooked, Bella running through the garden in mismatched boots, Emma concentrating deeply on her homework at the dining table, sunlight pooling around her hair like something gentle. These small moments wove themselves into routines that felt natural, as though they had been happening for years rather than weeks. There were still hospital visits, scheduled and careful. Emma and Bella would bring small drawings or flowers, sitting beside their mother, telling her about pancakes and forts and the way the fireplace crackled at night. Their mother listened with quiet relief, her eyes soft and full. She was healing, slowly but undeniably. Each visit ended with hugs, sometimes tears, but always a promise that they would come back soon. Those moments were hard, but not unbearable, not anymore. The girls no longer feared being separated at the doorway. They left hand in hand, returning to a place that waited for them. One evening, when the sun was setting behind the tall windows, turning the house gold and amber, Owen prepared dinner while the girls set the table. Bella placed napkins in uneven stacks, humming off-key and cheerful. Emma moved slower, tracing her fingers across each plate, adjusting the positions with quiet focus. The atmosphere was peaceful, warm, the kind of ordinary that once felt unreachable. Halfway through the meal, Bella dropped her fork, and it clattered loudly against the table, startling her. She looked up, expecting someone to snap, to scold, to tell her to be careful. But no one raised their voice. Owen simply smiled, picked up the fork, and handed it back to her. "No harm done," he said, as if it were the simplest truth in the world. Bella blinked and then grinned, relief blooming across her face. Emma watched, her expression softening again in that way that meant something inside her was learning to let go. Later that night, when Bella had fallen asleep curled up with her rabbit, Emma joined Owen in the living room. She stood at the window for a moment, watching the last fading streaks of daylight. The house was quiet, but not the fragile silence it once held. This was the quiet of comfort, of everything being in its right place. She turned toward him, her voice low. "Mrs. Green called." She didn't have to say who. The social worker had been the quiet thread that tied decisions together. Owen set his book aside. Emma took a breath, steadying herself. She said, "If you want, you can apply to be our guardian. Not just for now." Owen felt the air still, not from shock, but from the weight of the moment. He stood slowly and approached her, not rushing her, not stepping too close. "And how do you feel about that?" he asked. Emma didn't look away. She had grown into this moment, step by step, piece by piece. "I think, we already live here," she said. "I think, we already chose." Her voice wavered just slightly. "And I think Bella would be heartbroken if we had to leave." Anne. Her words got caught, but she pushed them through softly. "So would I." Owen didn't speak for several seconds. Instead, he placed a hand gently over his heart, a gesture so small yet so sincere it made Emma's breath hitch. "I would be honored," he said. The application process took time, meetings, signatures, home evaluations, hospital confirmations, but none of it felt heavy. Each step was simply walking forward, together. Emma's mother supported the decision fully, wanting nothing more than her daughters to be safe and loved while she healed. Mrs. Green observed the home several times and left each time with a warm expression rather than a clipboard full of concerns. What had once been temporary slowly took on permanence, not as a sudden change, but as something that had already happened quietly beneath them. The day the papers were finalized, Owen took the girls to the park. The trees had begun to bud, small blossoms opening like soft promises. Bella ran ahead, laughing, chasing bubbles that drifted on the breeze. Emma walked beside Owen, hands tucked into her pockets, shoulders relaxed. "Do you think she'll be home soon?" Emma asked. "Yes," Owen said. When she's ready. And when she comes home, she'll live with us too. Owen nodded. If she would like to. There will always be space for her. Emma took that in, the idea of a life not defined by scarcity but by return, by continuation, by growth. She didn't speak for a long moment. Then she said something very quiet, but very firm. So, this is our family. Owen looked at her, and the word didn't feel foreign anymore. It felt right. Yes, he said. This is our family. Bella tripped over her own feet then, as she often did, falling into the grass. Emma ran to her, laughing now, not in fear or worry but in relief that falls were no longer catastrophes. Owen watched them, watched the way they belonged to one another, watched the way the sun caught in their hair, and felt something like peace settle into his chest, something he had believed impossible for years. Not replacement. Not repair. Something new. Something whole. When they returned home that evening, the house met them with warmth, the kind that did not come from fireplaces or heaters, but from the presence of laughter, footsteps, and the knowledge that no one would be left behind again. And the red scarf hung by the door now,